Welcome back to another episode of Get Rich, the podcast that helps you do just that, get rich and stay rich. Now, I want you to imagine that you have just met the love of your life, only to find out he was a professional con artist who had stolen your entire life savings. That was unfortunately the gut-wrenching reality for Tracy Hall, as the final victim of the infamous fraudster Hamish McLaren. Yes, that's the same Hamish from the podcast, Who the Hell is Hamish? Tracy's stories made headlines in 2019, but what happened after the podcast ended? In this episode, Tracy shares how she picked up the pieces emotionally and financially and turned one of the darkest chapters in her life into a powerful story of resilience. One of the reasons I was so keen to have Tracy on the podcast is in 2023, Australians lost over $200 million to romance scams. And when I speak to women who've experienced some kind of romance scam, or when I've read their stories, the most common thing I hear is, I just never thought it would happen to me. And so that's why I was so keen to get Tracy on, because she's now doing a lot of work on the preventative side. So I hope you enjoy this very special conversation with Tracy. And this might be a good episode that you need to share with a girlfriend as well. And for those listening, if you haven't heard of it, it's an incredible storytelling night where women, they get a woman in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s to share a story from their lifetime. And it was so powerful. So I'll definitely pop the link in the show notes where you can check it out. But Tracy was one of the speakers and your story was so powerful. And I was just like, oh my God, it would be an absolute dream to have you on the podcast, because so much of what you said, I think, would resonate and our audiences can learn as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. It was such a great night and you only get 7 minutes. So there was a lot to cover in 7 minutes.
Was that it? Oh my God, that's so funny because it seemed like such a long time. But yeah, we were all just like living on every word you were saying. So it was fantastic. So what I wanted to just start with, I guess, is if we rewind, I guess if we take it back from the very start, how did you meet Hamish and what were those early days like?
Well, I met Hamish on a dating app, but he was not Hamish. His name was Max Tavita. He was 41 and he was a chief financial officer for a family office in Sydney. And he lived in Bondi. And I guess we just sort of connected through the dating app, started a conversation. We moved to a telephone conversation and we met in real life and started a relationship that went on for nearly a year and a half. And I was in my, I was 40, 41. So it was a fairly wholesome kind of relationship. I was single parenting at the time. I had a pretty big job at eBay in the city, running a big team. And I didn't have a lot of time for dating, but I knew that I was sort of in a place where I just wanted to meet a companion, somebody who shared such sort of similar values and interests to me. I was pretty clear, like I didn't want to be swept off my feet or find a new husband. I wasn't going to have any more children at that point. It really was just that companionship and finding my person. Yeah, our early days were just spent doing really kind of wholesome things like running and surfing and paddleboarding and hanging out, watching movies and getting takeaway and, things like that. It was pretty low key, actually.
Was there anything kind of early on that you look back now and go, oh, maybe I kind of brushed that aside, or maybe were there areas that weren't adding up, or was it all it all seemed pretty good?
Everything added up at the time. And this is the amazing thing about retrospect and looking backwards is, you can only really connect the dots in reverse, because at the time it was the only way I can describe it is that he created this movie. There were the sets, there were the scenes, there were the characters, that he created this world that had me believe he was exactly who he said he was, to the point where I felt comfortable giving him my life savings and to invest, because he was an investment professional and we had hundreds of conversations about investments and the global economy and political impacts on the economy, reports that he showed me, official documents that he'd shown me, his Bloomberg screens in his lounge room. This was an elaborate setup to have me believe, he spoke to people in his back office about trades they were executing for him. I heard people on the other end. I spoke to his CEO. So it was so elaborate. And I guess, when you have all of those pieces of information, it just confirms what you already believe to be true, which is confirmation bias, right? I didn't suspect anything. I mean, personally, he had a few quirks, but, we're in our 40s. Who doesn't have quirks? Who doesn't have quirks? But in terms of that side of things, everything really, really seemed to line up until it didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no way you would doubt that, would you? Like, especially with like the Bloomberg screens, the conversations with their CEO. So I guess if we kind of fast forward and, well, I guess, how did you learn that it was not what it seemed to be?
Yeah, so we had been away for a weekend in Byron Bay. He was up there supporting me with some work, and we came home, and the next day I missed a call from him, and I spent the rest of the day trying to get back in touch with him. And by that night, when I still hadn't spoken to him, I was getting pretty worried. By the next morning, and with no sleep, I was absolutely frantic because it was just so unusual for us not to be in contact. And so I had Bondi Police go and do a wellness check on him. And while they were doing that, a girlfriend called me and she said, I'm going to send you a link to a news article and you need to open it and you need to call me back. And immediately I thought he was dead, really. I thought there'd been some surfing accident or something had happened to him, and it was a news article. And I opened the link and it was a Crime Stoppers video of an unidentified man being arrested outside of his Bondi Beach apartment. But of course, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that that unidentified man was my boyfriend, Max Tavita. Except it wasn't Max Tavita. It was a man by the name of Hamish McLaren, who was being arrested for swindling 15 victims out of $7.6 million. So that is when my world came crashing down around me, and I soon realized that he had stolen my life savings as well.
Oh my God. That is just, it's wild. And so he'd done this to, was it 14 other victims as well?
I mean, he had done this to many, many people, but part of the case, as the case that rolled out in Australia, the criminal case, there were 15 victims and the missing amount was $7.6 million. But what we know is that there were many, many more victims. They just weren't part of the case.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So I guess with this, there are no words. And to call it a romance scam seems like almost too light for what it was, because it was complete deceiving. It was like a scam at a whole new level that people just weren't experienced in their lifetime. But the research I've seen is romance scams are on the rise and they're happening all the time. So I guess from the education part, now that you've had time to reflect, and when we say like, what were the red flags? Like, it would have been so, like, it sounds like there really were no red flags because it was just you in this love bubble. And that's what when you're in love, that's what it should feel like. But I guess kind of taking a step back now, what advice would you have to other women, whether it's even just around that financial, like giving your finances, handing your finances over to someone else? What kind of advice would you have now that you've had time to reflect?
Yeah, so many thoughts. And you make some really good points. Romance scams, a lot of people think that would never happen to me because I'm in a happy marriage, I'm in a long-term relationship. I like to think of them as relationship scams or relationship fraud. Even scams is too light a word.
Yeah, feels too light. Yeah.
It's like a little bit frivolous, a little bit fun, a little scam. Yeah. And these are financial crimes. There's generally a relationship involved, and it might not be an intimate relationship, but the person who is trying to extort you or take money from you will generally form a relationship with you. And that's how they get under your skin, into your head and into your heart, basically. But in terms of romance scams, the thing about red flags is that the reality is if they were big red flags flashing in front of your face in the moment, for me, I never would have done what I did. Never.
No.
At best, they're beige flags. things that sometimes you think, oh, that's a bit weird. And then you just get on with your life. And beige flags are the most dangerous flags of all, because they are the ones that can turn into red flags with patterns of behavior or other behaviors. And in the case of this financial crime that was committed against me by Hamish, there was nearly 18 months of coercion, control, and grooming that went on to essentially lure me into doing what I did. And this is how these financial crimes operate. So when it comes to money and women, regardless of whether you're in an intimate relationship or not, regardless of whether it's a scam or not, one of the things I say is that I gave away my financial power and my financial future way too easily. I'm not even embarrassed to admit that. I did. I had so much on my plate. I was single parenting. I was working a big job. I was tired. I was stretched. And here is a man who purports to love me, who has my back, who says he's a finance professional. Everything lines up to say he's a financial professional.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I just felt grateful that he offered to help me.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I should have given him anything but my money. I should have given him the laundry. I should have asked him to empty the dishwasher. I should have given him the after-school pick-up.
Yeah.
I should not have given him my money. And I don't know whether it's necessarily that I was financially illiterate. I was probably just more financially avoidant.
Yeah.
These were future me problems to solve because I had a very long to-do list. And what I say to women now is give away the shitty jobs to someone else and spend the time and the energy and lean in, because if you don't, then unfortunately what happened to me could happen to you, because you don't have to be, you don't have to lose your life savings to a con man too financially vulnerable. It can happen in divorce. It's been through a divorce, major illness, the death of a loved one. Like, there are so many situations where if you are not on top of your finances, your insurances, your will, everything to do with your money, then you are in trouble. And it's best to be on top of those things before the storms of life hit.
Big time. But I think you absolutely nailed it with women. The mental load is so large. There is children involved. There's careers involved. There's, like, for many women, it's keeping their house in a certain standard, being social, having exercise. Like, there's so much going on that it's very, and I see it a lot, it's very easy for women to go, do you know what, this is one thing I don't have to do, and handing over the power of those finances. But unfortunately, I know what we do see, and whether it's a situation like this or it's a divorce or the death of a loved one, like, you've got to be it is that thing of, unfortunately, this is something which has to become a priority in your life. I guess for then people who are listening, who maybe are even in their relationship and whatever that relationship status might be, have taken maybe the back step in their finances because life is busy and the mental load is a lot, and it's not easy for women at all. But I guess, what would you say to them? And do you have any suggestions of how they can take that kind of interest into the finances without, I guess, the partner being concerned?
Yeah, 100%. And it is normal to divide and conquer workload. Yeah. There is nothing wrong with that. Someone once said to me, and I love this saying, is outsource the execution, don't outsource the education. So lean into learning, turn up to every meeting with the accountants, be on every email, make sure you have every login, know what your balance is, know what your options are, because it is not about someone fooling you, defrauding you, or taking advantage of you. It is literally, if something happens to that other person who has control of those things, then you're in a bit of a pickle. And you don't have to do all the things. You just need to know about them, be knowledgeable, be on top of it, and just know what's going on. Because if you don't, you're left in the dark and you're vulnerable. And whether we like it or not, money gives us choices and money gives us power. And money gives us freedom as well, of course. But you never want to be in a situation where I'd say an example, and I wrote about it in my book. My dad died when my parents were 53. I was 25, something like this. My mom is really astute, worked her whole life, had a career, very good with the weekly and the monthly budget, but Dad did all the big things because that was the world that they grew up in, and that's what happened back in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
And Dad died. He was 53, and not only is my mum dealing with immense grief, she has to get her head around how she's going to unlock $10,000 for a funeral. She didn't even know where to start. She had no idea. And this is a woman who is incredibly intelligent. And I looked at that and I thought, I never want to be in that situation. And yet here I am. Like, this is the same thing happened to me. I outsourced the responsibility of the education and the knowledge to somebody else. And so for people listening, I would say, first of all, I appreciate that it's not easy. It is the last thing that you want to do. It is always the last thing on the to-do list. It is a future me problem to solve. I totally appreciate that. But I would say that if you can unload some other tasks that allow you to learn these things, and even just learn them a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
Get your head around what it means to build your super to a point where you know that you won't retire in poverty. Even if your husband's not around, or your partner, or you end up being single real life, which is a possibility too. A lot of people don't understand the simple things you can do with superannuation. And super, for most women, will be their largest financial asset that they have in their own name and solely in their own name. That is power right there. But it's not sexy. It's kind of hard. The language is getting. So, which is why I love what you do, Molly. Like, it makes it accessible. But just with a little bit of support, a little bit of help, and a little bit of agency and right mindset, is actually easier than you think.
It is, and it does take that little bit of time investment, but I say give me 45 minutes of your time, come to one of our super sessions. They're free. You will walk away with such a better understanding of super and why it's important and how to boost your super, and it only takes 45 minutes. Likewise with investing, likewise with our money makeovers. Like, you just have to invest this little bit of time and you are going to get so much back from it. And when you think of the timeline of your life, can't find 45 minutes for your own future, then it might need a few priority changes. And I would love to get your opinion on this as well, because we preach a lot at Ladies Finance Club to always have your own emergency fund, your own emergency money, but we're very big on it. It has to be in your name and your name only. What are your thoughts on emergency funds?
100%. They are so important. And the reason that I feel so strongly about having things like emergency fund is because when Hamish was arrested and I realized that everything I had was wrapped up in the investments that he was making for me, my 22 years of career superannuation, all of my tech shares that I sold, any savings that I had were they were gone in an instant. I had nothing. I had my monthly income, and I felt so exposed. I was so scared. I was scared of losing my job because that was my only financial lifeline. So if at all possible, in whatever season of life you're in, try and have your own income. But I had nothing. So in those sort of months and years afterwards, as I was trying to rebuild, I was so scared something was going to happen, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And that feeling and that fear and that stress and that anxiety on top of everything else is too much. And so your mental health takes it, your wellness and everything about your life, you're living in fear. And that's a horrible place to live. So super, super important to have it in your own name and somewhere where you can access it in case you need to personally. Yeah, prioritize that for sure.
Yeah, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I think it's incredible that you're now using this knowledge to educate and help so many women. It was a very public story. And I guess since going public, have you had many other women come forward with these similar experiences? And I guess how widespread is this?
You would not believe how many conversations I had. Well, actually, probably, Molly, you would believe because you...
I've had a few. But
it's wild because the truth is what happened to me is actually pretty extreme. Not many people will go through what I've been through, but it is a warning siren to others. What I do hear a lot of is stories around financial vulnerability in relationships, which is essentially what happened to me as well. It's just the outcome is very extreme. And women will often come up and say to me, I've just realized how financially vulnerable I am because I don't know the logins to our accounts. I don't know how to access investments. I don't know where our money goes, gets invested. They're really just unaware of what's going on financially, what sort of financial position they're in. And then I hear the really extreme stories as well where, you know, they might find that their partner is in a lot of debt, which means they're in a lot of debt. Or suddenly they wake up and their partner doesn't want to be in the marriage anymore and they're left with 4 kids and no access to a bank account.
Yeah.
I hear stories like this all the time. And this is why I'm so vocal about it, because yes, my experience is extreme and unlikely to happen to most people, but more likely that you'll find yourself financially vulnerable if you don't take agency over your money and, you know, planning for your own future. And that's not to say everyone's going to do the dirty. Like it really isn't like that at all. It's just about having that person's security just in case. Because the uncertainties of life, they're going to hit all of us. We have to be prepared for those things. And it's just, I can't tell you how much better I can sleep at night knowing all of these things are handled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you've nailed it on the head when you said, like, life will happen. We don't know what, but life will happen. And whether that is a divorce, a death, a medical issue, you want to make sure that you are prepared and you've got the right foundations in place. And so for women who are listening to this who go, look, I'm not, and it is funny because because I speak to a lot of women where, you know, life has happened. And probably the most common response I hear was, I never thought this would happen to me. Never thought this would happen. Never thought he would do this ever. Never thought I'd be in this situation. So for women, just for a bit of protection who maybe have, again, taken that back step, what I find when I have these conversations and women go, well, I don't know how to approach the topic with my partner because they've always looked after it. They're going to think I'm preparing for a divorce or I want to separate. Now that I'm showing all this keen interest in our finances, all of a sudden I think, and I feel that I go, yeah. And I know on another podcast episode it was about relationships and money. And he said, well, you might be surprised. They might be happy to share that mental load. But I guess, do you have any good starting points or anything you've come across where it's like, how do they make that initial, okay, I want to take a step into our finances for those? I mean, a lot of our listeners are very money savvy, but I guess for maybe some of their friends or first time listeners.
Yeah. And it might not be a conversation you've really had with your partner before. And money is really hard to talk about. I talk about it all the time, so I don't have a problem with saying you're probably the same, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's still really taboo for some people. People get really funny about it, and there's a lot of psychology wrapped up in money and family history and all of these things. I would say that if you broached a conversation as money and wanting to kind of get on the same page or come up with a plan or interested in the logins or help me understand or can I come along to the financial advisor's planning meeting with you, if any of those questions or requests responded with resistance or concern or suspicion, then I would say that that's maybe something to dig into a little deeper. I'm not going to say it's a red flag. I'm just going to say that if you're with somebody who doesn't want you to be involved, sometimes they can be the first signs of control and coercion. It could just be that they're shocked. Oh my God, I never thought you were interested in money. And that's okay as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say to people, use my story as the way in, hey, I heard this woman speaking about this topic and she was in this relationship and she lost all her money and it got me thinking X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Use things like this as ways to enter into the conversation. And if there are no issues, then that will be kind of welcomed with open arms. Yes, come with me, share the load, help. And it can be a matter of saying, look, I don't have time to execute this, but I really want to understand because I've been thinking, something happened to you and I've got the kids and you're unable to access or operate or whatever. Yeah. I want to know that we're all okay. And positioning it like that, I think, is sometimes an interesting way in. The response that you get is going to be your guidepost. And I would be concerned if there's some resistance.
That is such good advice. And I love those ways that you can broach that, the concern piece, but also use this conversation as that starting point. No, that's fantastic. And again, I just want to say such a big thank you for taking something so horrendous and turning it into something that can help so many people. That takes so much courage, and the number of lives that you will have helped through the work you're doing now. I would love to hear a little bit about your book. I've written a book. I know they are not the easiest things to do, especially I imagine yours would have been quite an emotional journey as well. So could you tell us a little bit about your book and also what it's called?
Yeah, so the book is called The Last Victim, and that is because I was Hamish McLaren's last victim before he was arrested. So that's where the title comes from. It is a story about, it's a memoir, so it's actually a story about my life, and it sort of details my life and experiences before, during, and after I met Hamish, because there was quite a lot that happened in my life before I'd even met Hamish, that quite a lot of adversity, I guess you could say. And I'm not going to give any spoilers because I would love everybody to read the book, but it really set me up to weather the storm, the incredible shitstorm that was Hamish McLaren when he came bumbling into my life. And I think without those experiences and sort of for the reader to understand who I am as a person before I even met him is kind of an interesting place to start. And then, of course, the details surrounding exactly how Hamish got under my skin, into my heart and into my head over that 16-month period. And then, of course, when he was arrested and what happened afterwards. And of course, that was very public. It was very public. The podcast was very public. Who the hell is Hamish? But then he was sentenced to 16 years imprisonment. That was reduced to 12 years. And then everything kind of stopped. And I went on my merry way and put my head down in my bum up and just worked to try and rebuild myself. But the third part of the book is really about, what do you do when something like this happens? Like, what does that look like? And I think, saying the other night at the event, Instagram will have us believe that it's sunrise yoga and cacao ceremonies every morning. And it certainly wasn't like that for me. I was a single mom working a big job. I was so scared of losing my job. There were a lot of tears. There was a lot of mess. There were a lot of years of just really trying to figure it all out. But over time, the light comes in through the cracks again, and I explore how I rebuilt not only financially but emotionally as well. So it's not a sad Sally story. It is a beacon of hope at the same time for anyone going through a really challenging time. So that's the book. The best place to get it right now is Amazon, but it is also an audiobook, so you can listen to my dulcet tones that will help you sleep at night. And there's also an ebook available as well.
Fantastic. And we'll be sure to link those in the show notes. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your journey. And again, it is an incredible story, and just, again, so grateful for all the work you're doing, bringing light to this topic.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on and continuing to keep the spotlight on this really important topic.
Mm-hmm.